A day of bufo mushrooms flotation. A B. alvarius secretion, LSD, mushrooms, and 5-MeO-DMT trip report by Sam. Posted to earwid.org, January 3rd, 2018. 5-MeO-DMT from bufo alvarius secretion, LSD, and P-cyanescens, followed by 4-ACO-DMT and P-cyanescens. An opportunity presented itself to partake of bufo alvarius toad secretion, as we know, a rich source of 5-MeO-DMT, and I decided I wanted to experience this. This would be under the supervision of an MD, someone with a great deal of experience administering toad secretion, or 5-MeO. Just the once, and for a full release dose, I was happy to experience this under the supervision of a doctor and someone with a great deal of experience in overseeing sessions. I knew of him and his work with the toad, as some friends had published his book and gave me a free copy to read and review. I had a very brief exchange with him over Facebook, which had been cordial, and having read his book, he came across as an affable guy, maybe with a slightly inflated ego. A good friend had seen him give a talk a few days prior to my session and had been fascinated by his talk, but said that during the Q&A afterwards, his ego seemed to come out a bit, something I had noticed a bit in his writing. I do think psychedelics can actually build up egos over time, and in some people, it causes a kind of God-Messiah complex. It may be that 5-MeO is a little more prone to this, but I'm not sure. So, my session. I found myself wandering through an industrial part of northeast London. I was excited and a little nervous. I'd come down on the train to London the night before and had been reading James Orrock's fascinating book, Tryptamine Palace, on the way down. In it, Orrock stated that 5-MeO taken before another psychedelic can dramatically boost its effects. He also stated that it actually works the other way around as well, with being on a psychedelic boosting the power of 5-MeO. Based on this, I decided to ingest a 10 microgram LSD blotter, these having been used for microdosing purposes, and 2 small dried psilocybe cyanescens mushrooms. I'm not sure 5-MeO needs any augmentation in terms of power, but I didn't want to miss out on the opportunity of going very deep. I finally found 2 barge boats, on which people had gathered in preparation for the session. A small, friendly group was in there, including the host and a good friend, and I felt comfortable on arrival. The other barge next to this one had been kitted out and made cozy for the sessions, which were conducted in a one-on-one context on a bunk in there. The doctor briefed us on how to smoke the vapour correctly, by breathing out and then inhaling the fumes gently from the glass pipe until he said, then putting a hand over one's mouth and counting to 10 while lying down. Everyone who went before me and came out seemed to be in a state of awe, with a sparkle in their eyes. One person had actually been in tears. My friend went before me and she came out with a very glowing testimonial, an experience of pure love. She is an atheist and a highly rational person, but she said that experience had challenged her views to some degree, and not that she was now a believer or anything, but the experience had certainly been very deep, moving, and profound. And thus, it was my turn. So I hopped on over to the other boat, and started to feel more nervous, which reached a crescendo with my heart racing before I smoked the vapour. The doctor had an assistant, a lovely girl, and both made sure I was comfortable, and we held hands and did a prayer before I smoked. Then, he lit the flame under the pipe and I started to inhale. I made sure to do it slowly, being careful not to waste any vapour. When I was done inhaling, I placed my hands over my mouth as instructed, lay down in the bunk, and started to count to 10. I'm not sure what number I made it to, but I certainly didn't make it to 10. There was a dramatic break or shift in my awareness, and I lost all contact with the barge, with London, with my body, and this very reality. My entire being was enveloped in this vast realm of bright white golden light, which I was flying through. I know 5-MeO isn't considered very visual compared to DMT, and certainly DMT is more visually complex, but this was still a dramatically visionary experience. My sense of individual self, of my isness, was obliterated, but some kind of awareness remained, experiencing flying through this realm of light. Personally, I find the 5-MeO experience incredibly hard to describe in words. The experience is, or occurs in, a state so far beyond the realm of words that it is really hard to communicate the state or its profundity in any tangible way. The state of consciousness I experienced felt very deep, profound, and quite sacred. Sacred is not a word I am prone to use. I appreciate how subjective it is, but this experience felt profound in a way I simply cannot describe in words. I have dabbled previously with 5-MeO, but those experiences could not hold up the faintest candle to this experience, in terms of its depth and power. There was a bit of fear for some time, due to the sheer raw power of the experience. I would consider this more powerful than my DMT breakthrough experience. In the latter, there was still a sense of I experiencing and observing, even if I had lost contact with my body and environment. On the 5-MeO, however, even the observing had been lost within the mix. I really cannot say how long the experience had lasted. Linear time does not apply to that space, but it seemed like a decent amount of time. When I started to come back, I finally opened my eyes and looked at the skylight of the barge and saw a tiny fly buzzing around up there. I knew I was back. I felt supremely relaxed once I became aware of my body again, and the post-experience afterglow state was very warm and comforting. I smiled, sat up, and caught the eyes of the doctor and his assistant and laughed. He smiled and nodded, and soon after, I burst into tears briefly. It does not like me to cry in the midst of or following psychedelic experiences, and I can't really explain why I did on this occasion, only that I was overwhelmed with the power, profundity, and beauty of what I had just experienced. The guys hugged me, and I hugged them both back, and then joined the collective of people in the barge next door, still very awed about what I had just been through. Shortly after, I left with my friend and went and had some nice food and chats. It was nice to reflect on the experience with a friend, even though we both really struggled to describe, let alone explain, what we had both just been through. Later that night, I linked up with some friends to have a psychedelic session, and 2-hour-long sessions in a flotation tank, which is my first time floating. We all dosed with a capsule of 5-MeO-DMT, and some of us nibbled a few psilocybe cyanescens mushrooms on the side. The trip setting was a little strange in terms of people's vibes. One guy there was clearly there to get high on whatever was to hand, and chat and laugh, although he had a really restless energy to him. Another guy was also restless, but going through some deep stuff. One of the other guys was on good form and wanting to chat, but getting distracted by these other two restless characters. My other friend, in hindsight, regrets taking mushrooms 5-MeO in that environment. He has been enjoying solo trips of mushrooms I have provided him with for the purposes of therapy, and he feels he missed out on a therapy session by consuming the mushrooms within this setting. I thought the setting would be much more calm and sedate than it turned out to be. I'd assumed we'd all be floating. Anyway, I made the most of the opportunity and had 2-hour-long float sessions. I had one while coming up on my 5-MeO mushroom mix. It took me around half the float session to really get comfortable, and when I'd started to get comfortable, I'd started to come up, with the darkness of the tank getting ever brighter with lights and colours, and the visionary spaces starting to open up. By the time I got out, I was feeling very calm and zen, and this affected the rest of my trip. While other peeps seemed quite restless, I felt very calm and serene. I was happy to sit down with legs crossed and eyes closed, chatting occasionally, more so as the night wore on, but happy to pay attention to what was unfolding in my inner space. One of the guys commented that I was a rock. I think partly I was in a good space due to the floating, but partly also due to the profound difference in experiential magnitude between a release dose of 5-MeO and the 4-ACO and mushrooms. The latter just felt so easygoing and light in comparison. It was interesting, but as the night wore on, I noticed that I was increasingly accessing the state of light I experienced earlier in the day on the 5-MeO, and my trip seemed to be deepening at the same time. I had another float session and got more out of this one. I was in the zone from the outset, and it was nice being able to pay attention to my inner state without the distractions of other people. I really enjoyed the experience of floating. When I stretched out, I could look behind myself, and it felt a lot like how I imagined being weightless in space must feel like. I felt refreshed and serene on getting out. I would definitely be intrigued to combine flotation with psychedelic experiences in the future, and would be interested in longer float sessions too. Finally, around 6 in the morning, following a day of deep psychedelic consciousness exploration, it is finally bedtime. And as I drop off to sleep on my friend's couch, several times I find myself powerfully launching into the 5-MeO state. At the time, this was fleetingly scary, as I felt my awareness dramatically shifting quite suddenly, although it was primarily really interesting. It never lasted long, seemed to occur on the boundary of waking and sleeping, but I have never experienced anything this vivid before. I have certainly experienced DMT and 5-MeO inspired dreams after having used both, but I've not had such vivid experiences of re-entering the 5-MeO state in partial waking consciousness so long after the event. I've heard that there can be 5-MeO reactivations for some time after one's initial experience, such as during meditation, following breathwork, or when dreaming, and also that one can gain access to the 5-MeO state when using other psychedelics, which after my experiences doesn't come as much of a surprise. I would definitely consider this experience with 5-MeO as one of my all-time peak life experiences, but also the hardest for me to explain why this is the case. Up there with my DMT breakthrough, my first time with iboga, and a few others. I would rate this experience as my most powerful. The released dose of experience of 5-MeO, going by my reading on these things, seemed to have more in common with a near-death experience than a traditional psychedelic one in some respects, and its power should in no way be underestimated. Without a doubt, this is some heavy-duty stuff. It should not be entered into lightly, and it's certainly not a recreational substance at these dosages. I do, however, feel very lucky to have experienced this. It's truly wondrous and amazing what a human being can experience. I just wanted to add a little bit of a personal addendum to this trip report, and while I have not experienced combining all of these substances together, especially in the situation he did, I do have a lot of experience with flotation tanks or sensory deprivation experiences. Whilst I've only ever done one for a full hour, I have a really great facility called Reset, the wellness centre in a town near me. And they offer lots of different wellness facilities like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, red light therapy, contrast therapy, cryotherapy, etc. It's just a wellness centre really, but the real thing that drew me there was the sensory deprivation experiences, which in a sense, if you don't know what they are, it's a tank. You go into this tank and it's got Epsom salt that sort of allows you to float on the water, and you float in a very still fashion, and the temperature of the water is in tune with your body temperature. So in a sense, that removes your sense of of touch. It's dark. You don't have to do it in the dark, but I mean, if you want to do the full sensory deprivation, you turn all the lights off, so that reduces your eyesight. It's pretty much completely silent. You have earplugs in, So yeah, all your senses are completely gone, and your sense of taste as well, unless you get that Epsom salt in your mouth, and let me tell you, that's not very nice, or when you get it in your ears. You want to stay as just still as possible to get the most out of the experience, and what it does is it hypercharges meditation. It really puts you into a meditative state, and as we know, for many people who are into spirituality, one of the deepest things you can do is meditate in a dark room where there's absolutely zero distractions. But what I find so comforting about the sensory deprivation tanks is that I think it's really good for, say, like beginner meditators who struggle just like literally sitting down in like a dark room and watching all of the, I don't know, I guess your shadow energy come up. It can be quite uncomfortable and a bit disturbing, but if you can let it go and really tap into the wide ocean of consciousness, as David Lynch would say. You're probably all getting sick of my David Lynch impression, but he was right. He's so true. When you practice meditation, transcendental meditation, whatever sort of meditation that you gravitate towards, you take a deep breath in, hold, breathe out, hold, rinse and repeat, watch thoughts come up, do nothing, don't try to control the thoughts, and the sensory deprivation tank can really amplify that feeling of just that feeling of expansive awareness, the widening of the mind. And if you have a golf ball sized consciousness, you wake up with a golf ball sized wakefulness, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah, for some reason my two main heroes in life, David Lynch and Terence McKenna, both have very similar interesting high-pitched accents and dialects. Rather funny that. Both two very interesting people. Terence McKenna obviously massively into psychedelics, and David Lynch I think was a proponent of altered states of consciousness, although he never went on record as saying he ever consumed anything other than marijuana. But interestingly, this will probably just sound like absolute bollocks to people who don't know either of these people, but to people who do, they probably find this quite interesting, is that David Lynch said that one of the most mystical experiences he ever had was actually driving marijuana in a car, which is not something I do not advocate at all, and he doesn't either, but this is just something that happened to him during his life. And it was the first time he really experienced an altered state of mind, a trance state, and this is one of the things that really kickstarted his love of the abstract. And what is the abstract? The definition for that is existing in thought or as an idea, but not having a physical or concrete existence. And this is really, I think, where a lot of people start to go from materialism to idealism, if you want to call that, where we start to see the physical world as less concrete and solid than it appears to be, and actually life, reality and consciousness are far more fluid and are actually, more related to fluidity than solidity. And this is why David Lynch's artwork and Terence McKenna's way of speaking is a lot more abstract than it is logical and rational. Life is filled with abstractions, and the only way we make heads or tails of it is through intuition. Intuition is seeing the solution, seeing it, knowing it. It's emotion and intellect going together. One of my favourite quotes from Lynch there. This is why I've always gravitated towards abstract thinkers rather than logical and rational thinkers, because they seem to be operating more in the astral. Not saying the astral is any better, but they operate on a meta perspective that isn't too entrenched within the rational human experience. It's operating from a point above. It's observing the 3D human experience from a heightened perspective. Doesn't mean it's better, but it's got a more holistic, wide perception of what's going on in the here and now, which gives it a bit more depth and breadth to it than the limited, solid, sort of restricted experience of just using the limits of the human mind. And oftentimes the only way to go beyond the human mind is to operate in an abstract thought, an abstract state of mind. And when you go in sensory deprivation tank, once you have like all physicality, solidity stripped away from you, and you combine that with certain psychoactive substances, of which many will produce different varieties of the sensory deprivation plus psychedelic experience. That, I mean, don't have to be psychedelic, and many psychoactive. I will say that I have had some dissociative and sensory deprivation tank experiences, and I've experienced this ocean of boundless consciousness that we all know and love, and lies at the base of all mind and matter. So, yeah, I completely understand why this person wanted to mix 4-ACO-DMT in a flotation tank experience. I think when you do these flotation tanks, for me personally, because of my own mind, the first like 20 minutes can be quite uncomfortable, and there's a lot of just sort of irritability that comes up to the surface. But once I let go of it around the 40-minute mark, I really let go into the experience. So I'd love to do one that allows me to do it for at least 2 hours, because I think that's when you're going to get the most out of it. You're going to really sink into the experience and face the shadow, face your demons. It doesn't have to be a demonic like purging experience, but you'll face a lot of like yourself that's been lingering in your subconscious in the back of your mind, as Eckhart Tolle would say. Yeah, and you stop playing the script that you've memorized your whole life. You let it go and you experience the now, the power of now. So yeah, thought this was a rather interesting commentary section. Probably most of you think I'm completely and utterly insane, but I think big ups to this guy. Major respect for merging these substances together and not in a... I know many of the times I share on the channel people combining all these substances and having crazy experiences and really mistreating the substances, but I think the way this guy went about mixing all these, or well, mixing them not all in one, but using them in conjunction with each other, one after the other, I think was really wise and respectful of him, and no wonder he had quite a positive experience. It seems like he really has a good head on him, good intention, wise sort of mindset, and just a purity of intent and mind going into the experience, and that's when you get the best out of psychedelics and these mystical states. Anyway, guys, what did you think of this person's experience? Did you think it was absolutely mental for combining all these super intense psychoactives together, or do you think that it's a respectable position to take in combining them in conjunction with each other, but also not in a reckless sort of I want to get high and experience whatever the hell this gives me sort of way that many of the intense combo enthusiasts do when I share them on the channel. But regardless of that, love you all, and I'll see you on the other side.